Welcome, dear listeners, to another episode of the English Globe. I'm your host, Adam, and I'm here with my wonderful co-host, Julia. We are so happy to have you with us today. Whether you're learning English for fun, for school, or for your career, this podcast is designed to help you learn real-world topics in clear, thoughtful English. So find a comfortable seat, grab your headphones, and let's dive into today's very big question.
Thank you, Adam. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the English Globe. Today we are going to talk about one of the most powerful organizations in the world, at least in theory. Our topic is the United Nations, power or powerless. We will explore the role of the United Nations, its history, achievements, and also its failures. Does the UN still matter in today's world? Or has it become a weak voice with no real power? That's what we'll be exploring.
This is such an important question, Julia. The United Nations was created after the Second World War to protect peace, promote human rights, and prevent future conflicts. But today, many people wonder if the UN can really achieve these goals. Some say it is powerful. Others say it is just symbolic. And that's why we want you, our dear listeners, to think deeply about this too. We want you to be part of this conversation with us.
Before we begin, we'd like to ask you for a small favor. If you enjoy this episode and find it helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, The English Globe. Your support means a lot to us and helps more English learners find our podcast. Also, let us know in the comments where you are listening from. We love hearing from students and listeners all around the world, and we're so grateful that you're spending time with us today.
Yes, we truly want to hear your opinion on today's topic. Do you think the United Nations is still powerful in 2025? Or has it lost its influence in a world dominated by national interests and global conflicts? Write your thoughts in the comment section below. We read every single one, and we often feature your ideas in our upcoming episodes. So don't be shy. Your voice matters, just like every country's voice should matter in the United Nations.
In this podcast, we're going to take you on a journey. We'll talk about how the UN was born, what its main goals are, what it has done well, and where it has failed. We'll look at real-life examples and facts. But we'll also ask deeper questions. Can one organization really bring peace to the world? Should we fix the UN or replace it with something better? And what role should regular people like you and me play in this global picture?
That's right, Julia. And we'll do all of this while keeping the English clear, slow, and simple, so you can improve your listening and speaking skills as we go. We're not just teaching English, we're learning about the world together. That's the mission of the English Globe. So, whether you are walking outside, drinking tea, or sitting at your desk, let's begin our discussion. Let's go back in time to the year 1945 and ask, why was the United Nations created in the first place?
Great question, Adam. Right after World War II ended, the world was broken. Millions had died, cities were destroyed, and there was deep fear that another war might come soon. So leaders from many countries came together in San Francisco, USA, and agreed to create a new organization that would help keep peace, protect human rights, and build a better world. This organization became the United Nations, and it officially began on October 24, 1945.
The main idea behind the UN was simple, but powerful. Never again. Never again should the world face a war as terrible as World War II. The leaders hoped that by working together, they could stop future wars before they started. They wanted to solve global problems with dialogue, not bullets, and they believed that all countries, big or small, should have a place to speak and be heard. That was the dream. But has that dream worked?
That is the heart of our discussion. Over the next episodes, we'll explore whether the UN has succeeded or failed in its mission. Some people point to the UN's work in health, education, and peacekeeping and say, yes, it's working. Others look at wars, political deadlocks, and veto powers and say, no, it's powerless. So stay with us as we explore the truth behind the headlines. And don't forget, this is your journey too.
So now, dear listener, take a moment to reflect. What do you think about the United Nations? Is it still a force for good, or has it become too weak to matter? We'll leave you with that thought. And in our next episode, we'll look deeper into the mission of the UN and how it tries to make the world a better place. Until then, take care, keep learning, and stay curious. This is Adam and Julia, signing off from the English Globe. The United Nations was created with very clear and important goals. Its main mission is to keep peace around the world and prevent new wars from starting. But peace is only one part of its work. The UN also promotes respect for human rights, supports social and economic development, and encourages countries to work together on problems like poverty, health, and climate change. These goals are written in a special document called the UN Charter, which all member countries agree to follow.
Exactly, Adam. The UN Charter guides everything the organization does. It describes the four main purposes of the UN: to maintain international peace and security, to develop friendly relations among nations based on equal rights, to achieve international cooperation in solving economic, social, cultural, and humanitarian problems, and to be a center for harmonizing the actions of nations. This means the UN tries to bring countries together to solve problems that no single country can solve alone.
To carry out these big missions, the UN has several main parts, each with its own role. The General Assembly is like the UN's main meeting place, where every country has a seat and a vote. Here, countries discuss global issues and make recommendations. Then there is the Security Council, which has 15 members and is responsible for keeping peace and security. It can make decisions that member countries must follow, including sanctions or even authorizing peacekeeping missions.
Alongside these, the UN has many specialized agencies and programs that focus on different issues. For example, the World Health Organization, WHO, works to improve global health, especially during disease outbreaks. The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, focuses on children's rights and welfare worldwide. There's also the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, which supports countries in fighting poverty and building better economies. Together, these agencies help the UN address a wide range of global challenges.
One unique feature of the UN is the International Court of Justice, ECJ, which settles legal disputes between countries and gives advice on international law. The ICJ helps countries resolve conflicts peacefully by using laws rather than force. This is an important tool for the UN's goal of promoting peace. However, not all countries accept the court's decisions, which sometimes limits its power. Still, it represents the UN's commitment to solving problems through dialogue and legal means.
The UN's work depends on cooperation from its member states. Countries provide the funding and the troops for peacekeeping missions. They agree to follow the decisions made by the Security Council and participate in General Assembly meetings. But this cooperation can be difficult. Countries often have different interests and political goals. Powerful countries, in particular, may have a lot of influence in the UN, especially in the Security Council, where 5 permanent members have veto power. This can make decision-making slow or blocked.
Despite these challenges, the mission of the UN remains important today. Peacekeeping forces have helped stop fighting in many regions, and the UN's humanitarian efforts have saved millions of lives during crises. The organization also plays a key role in promoting sustainable development and fighting climate change. The Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, are a set of 17 global goals created by the UN to end poverty, protect the planet, and ensure prosperity for all by 2030.
The mission of the United Nations is wide and ambitious. It is designed to help countries come together, solve problems peacefully, and improve life for all people. But this mission can be difficult to achieve when nations disagree or do not cooperate. In the next section, we will explore some of the UN's biggest achievements and look at how it has used its power to make a difference. We'll also see where the UN's efforts have been less successful. Stay with us as we uncover the realities behind the mission.
When we look at the United Nations, it's important to recognize the many ways it has made a positive difference in the world. Despite its challenges, the UN has contributed to peace, health, human rights, and development in many countries. One of the most visible signs of the UN's power is its peacekeeping missions. Since 1948, the UN has sent peacekeepers to troubled regions to help stop violence and protect civilians. For example, in Namibia during the late 1980s and early 1990s, the UN helped organize free elections that led to independence and peace after years of conflict.
Yes, Adam. Namibia's case is a clear example of the UN's ability to support peaceful transitions. Another important success story comes from Sierra Leone in the early 2000s. After a brutal civil war, the United Nations mission in Sierra Leone, UNAMSIL, played a crucial role in ending the violence, disarming fighters, and helping rebuild the country. The mission helped restore order and gave people hope for a safer future. These peacekeeping efforts show the UN can be a powerful force when countries cooperate and allow the organization to act.
Beyond peacekeeping, the United Nations has made major contributions to global health. The World Health Organization, a specialized agency of the UN, has led campaigns to eradicate deadly diseases such as smallpox. Smallpox was declared eradicated in 1980, thanks to a worldwide vaccination effort coordinated by the World Health Organization. More recently, the United Nations has played a key role in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Through cooperation among countries, the UN helped distribute vaccines and provide health information to vulnerable communities around the world.
The United Nations is also a powerful advocate for human rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, adopted by the General Assembly in 1948, is one of the most important documents in modern history. It sets out basic rights and freedoms that everyone should have, including the right to life, freedom of speech, and freedom from torture. The UN works to monitor human rights violations and supports efforts to bring justice to victims. Its human rights councils and committees raise awareness and pressure governments to respect these rights.
The UN's influence can also be seen in major political changes around the world. For example, the organization played a role in ending apartheid in South Africa. International pressure, including UN sanctions and support for anti-apartheid movements, helped bring an end to this system of racial segregation. Similarly, the UN helped support the creation of Israel in 1948 by approving a plan to divide British-controlled Palestine into separate Jewish and Arab states. Though this decision remains controversial, it showed the UN's ability to influence world affairs.
Another area where the UN has been powerful is in addressing global environmental issues. The UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC, brought countries together to fight climate change. This led to international agreements like the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. These agreements aim to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and limit global warming. While progress is slow and challenges remain, the UN provides a vital platform for cooperation on an issue that affects every country and every person on the planet.
The UN also supports education and poverty reduction through programs like UNESCO and the United Nations Development Programme, UNDP. These organizations work in developing countries to improve schools, provide clean water, support small businesses, and help build strong communities. Through these efforts, the UN helps millions of people improve their quality of life and break the cycle of poverty. These achievements demonstrate the UN's power to bring positive change beyond just peace and security.
Despite all these successes, it is important to remember that the UN's power depends on the willingness of countries to cooperate and act together. The UN can only be as strong as the support it receives from its member states. When countries disagree or ignore UN decisions, the organization's ability to act is limited. However, these achievements show that the UN can be a powerful force for good when countries come together with a shared commitment to peace, health, human rights, and sustainable development.
So, while the United Nations may not be perfect and it faces many challenges, its record of accomplishments cannot be ignored. The organization has helped millions of people and prevented countless conflicts through its peacekeeping and humanitarian work. In our next section, we will explore one of the most debated parts of the UN, the Security Council, and why its structure raises questions about the true power of the United Nations. One of the most important and controversial parts of the United Nations is the Security Council. This body has the primary responsibility for maintaining international peace and security. It can make decisions that member countries are supposed to follow, including imposing sanctions or authorizing military action. But the Security Council's power is complicated by its structure, which gives 5 permanent members, known as the P5, the ability to veto any decision.
That's right, Adam. The 5 permanent members are the United States, Russia, China, the United Kingdom, and France. Each of these countries has the power to stop any Security Council resolution by using their veto, even if all other members agree. This veto power was designed after World War II to prevent the UN from taking action against the world's most powerful nations. However, many critics argue that it gives these 5 countries too much influence and can block important decisions.
The veto power has often led to deadlock in the Security Council. For example, in conflicts like Syria and Ukraine, permanent members have used their veto rights to prevent the UN from taking stronger actions. This has frustrated many countries and observers who believe the UN should be able to respond more effectively to stop violence and protect civilians. The veto can mean that political interests of powerful countries sometimes outweigh the need for peace or justice.
Moreover, the composition of the Security Council reflects the power structure of the world in 1945, not today. Some important global powers, like India, Brazil, Germany, and Japan, do not have permanent seats. This raises questions about whether the Council is truly representative of the modern world. Many people and countries have called for reform to include new permanent members or to limit the veto power. But these changes are difficult to achieve because they require agreement from the existing permanent members.
This power dilemma shows both the strength and the weakness of the United Nations. On the one hand, the Security Council can make binding decisions that all UN members must follow, giving the UN real authority. On the other hand, the veto power of the P5 can block important actions, leaving the UN powerless in some of the world's most serious crises. This tension is at the heart of many debates about whether the UN is still relevant and effective today.
Despite these challenges, the Security Council has made important contributions. It has authorized peacekeeping missions that helped end conflicts and supported efforts to combat terrorism and nuclear proliferation. However, when the Council cannot act due to vetoes or disagreements, the UN's ability to respond to crises is limited. This has led to criticism that the UN is often more a forum for discussion than a powerful actor that can enforce peace and security.
The veto power also raises questions about fairness and equality within the UN system. While every country has one vote in the General Assembly, the Security Council's permanent members have special privileges. This imbalance can lead to frustration among smaller or less powerful countries that feel their voices are ignored when it comes to real decisions on peace and security. It creates a system where power is concentrated in the hands of a few.
The difficulty of reforming the Security Council is another challenge. Changing the UN Charter to add new permanent members or limit veto rights requires the approval of 2/3 of the General Assembly and the consent of all permanent Security Council members. This means that the very countries with veto power can block reforms that would reduce their influence. This makes the Security Council resistant to change and can prevent the UN from adapting to new global realities.
In summary, the Security Council is a powerful body within the United Nations, but its structure creates a dilemma. It can both empower and limit the UN's ability to act in international crises. This dilemma is central to the question of whether the UN is powerful or powerless. It shows the complex balance between respecting the sovereignty of powerful nations and the need for collective action to maintain global peace.
In our next section, we will explore some of the major criticisms of the United Nations beyond the Security Council. We'll look at issues such as bureaucracy, inefficiency, and cases where the UN has failed to prevent or stop conflict. Understanding these criticisms will help us see the challenges the UN faces in fulfilling its mission in today's complex world. Stay tuned for more as we continue this important conversation.
While the United Nations has many successes, it also faces serious criticism from governments, experts, and ordinary people around the world. One common complaint is that the UN is often slow and inefficient, because it relies on cooperation between many different countries with different interests. Decision-making can take a long time. Sometimes, urgent crises are not addressed quickly enough, and this delay can cost lives. Critics say this bureaucracy makes the UN less effective than it should be.
Yes, Adam. Another major criticism concerns the UN's lack of enforcement power. Unlike a government, the UN cannot force countries to follow its decisions unless those countries agree. For example, when the Security Council imposes sanctions or authorizes peacekeeping forces, member states must provide the necessary resources and support. But when countries choose not to cooperate, the UN's ability to act is limited. This can make the UN seem powerless, especially in conflicts where powerful nations have different agendas.
The UN has also faced criticism for failing to prevent some of the worst humanitarian disasters in recent history. The tragedies in Rwanda in 1994 and Srebrenica in 1995 are often cited as examples where the international community, including the UN, did not act decisively to stop genocide and mass killings. In Rwanda, over 800,000 people were killed in just a few months, and UN peacekeepers were unable to prevent the violence. These failures have damaged the UN's reputation and raised questions about its effectiveness.
Similarly, in Darfur, Sudan, the UN was criticized for being slow to respond to ongoing violence and human rights abuses. Although peacekeeping forces were eventually deployed, the situation remained unstable for many years. Critics argue that the UN sometimes lacks the political will or resources to address conflicts in a timely and meaningful way. This has led some to say that the UN is more focused on diplomacy and talking, rather than taking strong action when it is most needed.
Another challenge is that the UN's peacekeeping missions themselves can face serious problems. Peacekeepers sometimes lack the resources, training, or authority needed to protect civilians effectively. There have been reports of misconduct and abuse by some peacekeeping personnel, which harm the UN's credibility. While many peacekeepers work bravely under difficult conditions, these issues have led to calls for reform and stronger oversight within the UN system.
Beyond peace and security, the UN's role in development and humanitarian aid is also questioned at times. Some critics argue that UN programs can create dependency in developing countries instead of encouraging self-sufficiency. They worry that foreign aid, even when well-intentioned, might reduce local initiative and slow economic growth. However, supporters say that the UN provides essential support where governments are unable to meet basic needs, especially in crises such as famine or natural disasters.
The UN's structure and funding system are also often criticized. Because the organization depends on contributions from member states, it can be vulnerable to political pressures. Some countries delay or withhold funding to push their political agendas or punish the UN for taking certain positions. This unstable funding can disrupt important programs and missions. Additionally, the influence of powerful countries sometimes affects which issues receive attention and resources.
Finally, some critics believe that the UN is simply a stage for political drama where countries use it to promote their own interests rather than work together. The Security Council's veto power and political rivalries can turn the UN into a place of disagreement and deadlock. This can give the impression that the UN is ineffective or powerless in solving global problems. Still, others argue that despite these difficulties, the UN remains the best platform we have for international cooperation.
All these criticisms highlight the challenges the United Nations faces in a complex and often divided world. It is not easy to coordinate 193 countries with very different priorities and histories. While the UN has important tools and resources, political realities and disagreements can limit its ability to act decisively. This brings us back to our central question. Is the UN truly powerful, or is it often powerless in the face of global challenges?
Understanding these criticisms helps us see that the UN's power depends on much more than its rules and structure. It depends on the willingness of countries to cooperate and the ability of the organization to adapt to new challenges. In the next episode, we will look at how the UN handles some of the most difficult conflicts and whether it can stop wars or only respond after violence has begun. Join us as we continue to explore the power and limits of the United Nations.
Throughout its history, the United Nations has faced many wars and conflicts, but the question remains, can it truly stop them, or does it simply react after the damage is already done? The United Nations was created to prevent war and promote peace. But the reality of global politics often makes this mission difficult. In many cases, the UN arrives only after a conflict has already broken out, and even then, its ability to stop the violence depends on permission, funding, and cooperation from its members.
Let's begin with a difficult example, Syria. Since 2011, Syria has been trapped in a brutal civil war that has killed hundreds of thousands and displaced millions. The UN has held emergency meetings, passed resolutions, and sent humanitarian aid, but it has been largely unable to stop the war. One major reason is the disagreement within the UN's Security Council. Countries like Russia and the United States have different interests in Syria, and their use of veto power has blocked stronger action from the UN.
This example shows how the UN can be limited when powerful countries disagree. The Security Council needs unity to act, but when members use their veto to protect allies or political interests, the UN cannot move forward. In Syria, this has meant years of fighting without a clear solution. Although UN agencies like the World Food Programme have provided help to civilians, the conflict itself has continued with little interruption from the UN's peace and security mechanisms.
Another example comes from the conflict in Ukraine. When Russia invaded Crimea in 2014 and launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the United Nations General Assembly quickly condemned the aggression. Many countries voted to support Ukraine and called for peace. But the Security Council, where Russia is a permanent member, was unable to take strong action because Russia used its veto power. This situation showed again how the UN's most powerful body can be blocked by political interests.
And yet, even when it cannot stop wars, the UN still plays an important role in conflict zones. Peacekeeping forces have helped maintain fragile ceasefires, protect civilians, and support negotiations between fighting groups. In places like the Democratic Republic of Congo and Mali, UN peacekeepers are on the ground trying to create space for peace and stability. These missions are not always successful, but they can reduce violence and save lives, especially when they have strong international support.
Peacekeeping missions can also help rebuild countries after conflict. For example, in Liberia, the UN helped guide the country from civil war to peace and democracy. Its missions supported elections, trained police, and helped disarm fighters. Liberia is now considered one of the UN's success stories in post-conflict recovery. However, success depends on more than just troops. It requires long-term commitment, funding, and trust from local people and leaders.
In some conflicts, the UN's presence is more symbolic than powerful. It sends a message to the world that people are watching, that human rights are being documented, and that there is international concern. This pressure can sometimes lead governments to change their behavior, but not always. In places like Myanmar or Yemen, the UN has spoken out against violence and supported peace talks, but it hasn't been able to force an end to the fighting. Again, this shows the limits of what the UN can do without real political unity and military force.
Critics argue that the UN is often reactive rather than preventive. In many situations, the world waits until there is a crisis before acting. The UN has early warning systems and teams that monitor rising tensions, but it rarely intervenes early enough to stop a conflict before it starts. This is partly because of respect for national sovereignty and partly because of political disagreement among member states. As a result, opportunities for early action are often missed.
There's also the challenge of resources. Peacekeeping missions are expensive and complex. They require soldiers, equipment, and logistics from many different countries. Sometimes, nations promise support but fail to deliver. Without enough funding or trained personnel, peacekeeping efforts become weak and ineffective. In places where the UN is stretched thin, its forces may be unable to protect civilians or maintain order, which leads to disappointment and even criticism from the communities they are meant to help.
Still, it's important to note that the UN continues to serve as a place where countries can talk, negotiate, and seek peaceful solutions. Even if the UN cannot stop every war, it often plays a role in the diplomatic process. Peace agreements, ceasefires, and humanitarian corridors have all been supported or coordinated by the UN. In the long term, creating space for dialogue may be one of the most valuable things the organization can offer in times of conflict.
So, is the UN powerful in global conflicts? The answer is complicated. The UN can be a force for peace and stability, especially when countries cooperate and provide resources. But when there is division among powerful nations, or when there is no political will, the UN's influence becomes limited. It can bring people to the table, support peacekeeping, and protect human rights, but it often lacks the tools and freedom to act decisively in the middle of war.
As we've seen, the UN is both strong and weak, powerful in theory, but limited in action. It depends on its members to give it strength. Without unity and support, it struggles. In the next section of our podcast, we'll explore how the UN works with developing countries. We'll look at how it tries to promote growth, fight poverty, and support nations in building better futures. Stay with us as we continue to ask the big question: is the UN still the organization the world needs?
One of the most important roles of the United Nations is supporting developing countries. These are nations that face challenges such as poverty, hunger, weak health systems, poor education, and fragile governments. The UN helps these countries in many ways through food aid, education programs, disaster relief, development funding, and technical support. The goal is to create stronger, more self-sufficient societies that can grow peacefully and provide better lives for their people.
The United Nations does not work alone in this mission. It operates through many agencies and programs, each focused on specific areas of development. One of the most well-known is the United Nations Development Programme, or UNDP. This agency helps countries fight poverty, build democratic institutions, and improve public services. In many parts of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, UNDP teams work with local governments to train leaders, modernize infrastructure, and support small businesses.
Another important program is UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Fund. UNICEF focuses on the health, education, and safety of children and young people. In poor or conflict-affected areas, UNICEF builds schools, trains teachers, provides clean water, and helps vaccinate children against deadly diseases. Its work has saved millions of lives and helped entire generations grow up healthier and better educated. This is one of the most respected and visible parts of the UN's mission in developing countries.
Let's not forget the World Food Programme, or WFP. This UN agency fights hunger by providing food to people in crisis. Whether it's a natural disaster, a war zone, or an area suffering from extreme drought, WFP brings emergency food supplies to those who need it most. The programme also supports local farmers and markets to help communities become more food secure in the long term. In 2020, the WFP was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for its life-saving work during some of the world's toughest emergencies.
In recent years, the UN has also focused on long-term goals to support developing countries through the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. These 17 goals include targets like ending poverty, providing quality education, ensuring clean water and sanitation, achieving gender equality, and promoting decent work. All member countries have agreed to work toward these goals by the year 2030. The SDGs give the world a shared framework for progress, especially in places where development is still a daily struggle.
The UN also helps developing countries recover from crises and build resilience. After natural disasters such as earthquakes, floods, or hurricanes, the UN provides emergency assistance and helps communities rebuild. In places where governments are weak or have collapsed, the UN can offer technical advice, election support, and even help rewrite constitutions. For countries emerging from war or dictatorship, the UN's help in building fair and peaceful societies can be essential for long-term recovery.
However, not everyone agrees that the UN's development work is always effective. Some critics say that UN aid can create dependency rather than independence. They argue that when countries receive too much outside help, they may stop building their own systems and rely too heavily on foreign support. Others say that some UN programs are slow, expensive, or badly managed, and that money does not always reach the people who need it the most. These criticisms highlight the importance of accountability and transparency.
Still, for many developing countries, the UN remains a vital partner. It offers resources and knowledge that may not be available locally. It connects governments with international experts and builds bridges between cultures. The UN also advocates for the rights of the poor, the marginalized, and those often forgotten in global politics. Its presence in developing regions gives people hope and a sense that the world cares about their future, even if progress is slow and challenges are many.
It's also important to remember that the UN cannot solve every problem on its own. Development requires long-term effort, strong local leadership, and cooperation from both the global north and south. The UN provides support, but lasting change must come from within. In the best cases, the UN helps unlock local potential by giving countries the tools and support they need to grow and stand on their own. That's when its power is most visible, not in control, but in collaboration.
In conclusion, the UN plays a major role in supporting developing countries. Through food programs, education, disaster relief, and long-term development planning, it tries to make the world more equal and just. While there are fair criticisms, especially about dependency and management, the UN's contribution to development is still seen as essential by many nations. In the next section, we'll ask a hard question. Can the UN be reformed to work better? Or is it stuck in an outdated system that no longer fits the modern world?
After looking at the strengths and weaknesses of the United Nations, many people ask a very serious question. Can the UN be reformed? Can this international organization, created almost 80 years ago, change to meet the needs of today's world? Or is it too large, too political, and too divided to improve itself? Calls for reform have grown louder over the years, but actually changing the UN is a complex and often frustrating process that faces many obstacles.
The first and most debated topic in UN reform is the Security Council. As we discussed earlier, the Council has 5 permanent members with veto power, countries that reflect the world's power balance after World War II. But the world has changed. Countries like India, Brazil, Germany, Japan, and South Africa are now major global players, yet they have no permanent seat. Many believe the Security Council should include more countries from different continents to make it more fair and modern.
However, reforming the Security Council is extremely difficult. Any change requires a change in the UN Charter, which must be approved by 2/3 of all UN members, including all 5 permanent members. That means the very countries who benefit most from the current system have the power to block any reform. For example, if a proposal threatens the influence of the US, Russia, or China, they can simply say no, and the proposal dies, even if most of the world agrees with it.
Another area where reform is often discussed is in the UN's management and bureaucracy. Critics say the UN is too slow, too complex, and spends too much time on paperwork instead of action. There are dozens of agencies, departments, and offices, each with its own rules and leadership. This can create confusion and waste resources. Many people argue that the UN needs to be more efficient, more transparent, and more focused on results, not just procedures.
Funding is also a major challenge. The United Nations depends on financial contributions from its member states to carry out its programs. Some countries pay on time, while others delay or reduce their payments. The United States, for example, has at times withheld funds to express political disagreement. This creates uncertainty and limits what the UN can do. Some experts have suggested new funding models, including taxes on international trade or global corporations, but these ideas are controversial.
Reforming peacekeeping operations is another key issue. UN peacekeepers often operate in dangerous places with limited resources and unclear mandates. There have been cases where peacekeepers could not stop violence or protect civilians effectively. Some reforms focus on better training, stronger leadership, and faster deployment of peacekeeping forces. Others suggest changing the rules to allow peacekeepers to take stronger actions when civilians are under threat.
In terms of representation and fairness, many smaller and developing countries feel their voices are not heard in major UN decisions. Although every country has one vote in the General Assembly, the real power often lies with wealthier and more influential states. To address this, some reformers want to give more weight to the concerns of the Global South. They propose stronger regional bodies and increased representation in UN leadership roles.
There is also the idea of digital reform. The world has changed dramatically in terms of technology, yet many UN systems are outdated. Communication, data sharing, and project tracking need modernization. In a time of artificial intelligence, social media, and instant communication, the UN must upgrade its tools to match the modern age. Some UN departments have started using digital platforms and AI tools, but much more work is needed to bring the whole system up to date.
Despite all these reform ideas, progress is slow. Why? Because the UN is not a single government. It's a collection of 193 independent countries, each with its own interests. Every major decision needs broad agreement, and powerful countries are often unwilling to give up their privileges. This creates a kind of paradox. Everyone agrees that reform is necessary, but no one can agree on how to do it, or they don't want to lose their own influence in the process.
Still, some small reforms have been successful. For example, the UN has improved its focus on gender equality, environmental issues, and anti-corruption. New leadership within the UN, like recent Secretaries General, have pushed for more transparency and accountability. These steps may seem small, but they are important. Reform doesn't always mean huge changes overnight. It can also be gradual improvement that strengthens the UN from the inside out.
In the end, reforming the UN is possible, but it requires political will, global cooperation, and a shared vision for the future. The United Nations was created in the hope of building peace and solving global problems together. That mission is still valuable today, perhaps more than ever. But for the UN to succeed in the 21st century, it must adapt. It must listen to its critics, learn from its failures, and keep striving to do better for all people, not just the powerful few.
In our next section, we'll shift from criticism and reform to something more hopeful. We'll explore the future of the United Nations, what role it could play in a rapidly changing world. Can the UN lead the way in global cooperation on climate change, artificial intelligence, and new forms of conflict? Or will it be left behind by faster, more flexible systems? Join us in the next episode as we imagine what comes next for the United Nations.
As the world continues to change faster than ever before, many people are asking what role the United Nations will play in the future. With rising tensions between powerful countries, growing inequality, climate change, digital threats, and unexpected health emergencies like COVID-19, the challenges facing humanity are becoming more complex. So, can the UN evolve and lead in this new global era, or will it slowly lose its influence and become irrelevant?
Let's start with one of the biggest issues of our time, climate change. The United Nations has already made this a top priority. Through agreements like the Paris Climate Accord, countries have promised to reduce carbon emissions and work together to protect the planet. But the question remains, will countries take real action or just make promises? The UN's future depends on its ability to push governments to move beyond words and toward real measurable results for the environment.
Yes, Julia. Climate change is not just about rising temperatures. It affects food supply, water access, migration, and even conflict. The United Nations has the tools to bring countries together, share scientific knowledge, and fund sustainable development. The future of the UN could see it becoming a true leader in global climate efforts, especially if it focuses more on accountability, green innovation, and supporting developing nations hit hardest by environmental changes.
Another area where the UN must grow is technology and digital governance. The internet, artificial intelligence, and cybersecurity have created a new kind of global space, one with no borders, but full of risk. Fake news, online hate, surveillance, and digital warfare are now major threats. The UN must adapt by creating stronger guidelines, international cooperation, and fair digital rules. If it does not take the lead in this area, other powers may shape the rules in unfair or dangerous ways.
The United Nations must also prepare for future conflicts that are not like traditional wars. Today's wars are hybrid, fought with drones, information, and cyber attacks, not just tanks and missiles. The UN will need to modernize its peacekeeping tools and its understanding of security. This could include digital peacekeepers, AI-powered monitoring systems, and partnerships with private tech companies. The way we protect peace in the future may look very different from the past.
Global health emergencies are also a key issue. COVID-19 showed how connected we all are and how unprepared we were. The World Health Organization, a UN agency, was at the center of the response. In the future, the UN must improve coordination, data sharing, and support for health systems. It needs to help build stronger health networks in poor countries and prepare the world for new diseases before they spread. Health security must become part of the UN's long-term mission.
The future of global education also offers opportunities for the UN. Through UNESCO and other agencies, the UN already promotes learning for all. But with digital learning, AI, and rapid job market changes, education must evolve. The United Nations can lead global efforts to make sure all people, especially in poor or remote areas, have access to quality education. This includes digital tools, teacher training, and content that prepares young people for the jobs of tomorrow.
Another key question is how the UN will deal with rising nationalism and division. In recent years, some countries have pulled away from international cooperation and focused only on their own problems. This weakens global unity. The UN must find new ways to rebuild trust and remind nations that today's problems, like pandemics, migration, or climate, can only be solved together. Its strength in the future depends on its ability to make global unity feel practical, not just symbolic.
We should also talk about youth and new generations. The future of the UN will depend on young people who believe in its values. That means the UN must open its doors to more youth voices, involve them in decision-making, and support their energy for change. Whether it's on climate, human rights, or peace, young people around the world are already taking action. The UN should support them, learn from them, and give them real power inside the system.
Lastly, the UN must decide what kind of organization it wants to be: a neutral space for dialogue, or a stronger global actor with more authority. Can it remain passive when human rights are violated? Can it stay silent in the face of war, corruption, or injustice? In the future, the world may expect the UN to take bolder steps, even if it means challenging powerful countries. The organization will need to balance diplomacy with courage if it wants to lead.
So, what is the future of the United Nations? That depends on all of us: governments, citizens, businesses, and young people. If we demand more from the UN and work together to improve it, then it can still be the most important symbol of global unity. But if we ignore it, weaken it, or let it become outdated, the UN may fade away. The future is full of challenges, but also full of potential. The United Nations still has a chance to rise.
In our final section, we'll bring together everything we've discussed, from the UN's strengths and successes to its weaknesses and criticisms, and we'll try to answer the big question once and for all: is the United Nations powerful or powerless? Stay with us for the conclusion of our podcast series here on the English Globe.
After exploring 10 sections of discussion, from the history and structure of the United Nations to its successes, failures, and future, we return to the question at the heart of this podcast. Is the United Nations powerful, or is it powerless? As we've seen, the answer is not simple. The UN has both remarkable strengths and frustrating weaknesses. It has the ability to inspire hope, but also the tendency to disappoint. It stands as a symbol of unity, yet often struggles to act as one.
The truth is, the power of the United Nations lies in its purpose and potential, not always in its results. When countries come together with trust and cooperation, the UN can accomplish incredible things: ending wars, fighting hunger, promoting education, and defending human rights. We've seen it in post-conflict peacekeeping missions, in child vaccination campaigns, and in disaster relief efforts. In these moments, the UN is not only powerful, it is essential to human progress.
Yet when global politics divide the Security Council, or when powerful nations use the veto to block action, the UN appears weak. It becomes more of a discussion table than a tool for justice. In places like Syria, Ukraine, or Myanmar, its inability to act decisively has led some to question its relevance. This is where the image of the UN as powerless takes shape. People see the speeches, the debates, and the resolutions, but they also see the suffering that continues.
Still, it's important to remember that power is not always about force. The United Nations was never meant to be a world government with its own army or police force. Its real strength lies in being a space where nations can speak, argue, compromise, and sometimes find peace. It's a global table, and often, just having that table prevents more conflict than we realize. The UN's influence is quiet, but it touches nearly every country on Earth in some way.
When we talk about power, we also need to ask, power for what? If we mean military strength or immediate authority, the UN is limited. But if we mean the power to shape minds, build cooperation, and create a shared vision for the future, then the UN has power that no single nation does. It represents the belief that the world is better when it works together. That idea, by itself, is powerful. And in times of global crisis, it becomes even more valuable.
And let's not forget the impact the UN has on ordinary people. The child who gets an education thanks to UNICEF, the farmer who receives food aid from the WFP, or the refugee who finds safety under the UNHCR's protection. These aren't headlines, but they're lives. They're the quiet, everyday proof that the UN does matter. It may not stop every war or fix every crisis, but it does save lives, promote dignity, and remind the world of shared responsibility.
Of course, the United Nations must also evolve. It must reform its structure, especially the Security Council. It must become more efficient, more transparent, and more digital. It must give more voice to youth, women, and the global South, and it must stand stronger in defense of human rights, even when it's politically uncomfortable. The future of the UN depends on its ability to adapt while holding on to its core values of peace, equality, and cooperation.
So, what's the final answer? Is the UN powerful or powerless? Maybe the better answer is this. It is as powerful as we allow it to be. If governments use it as a tool for peace and global good, it becomes powerful. If they ignore it or abuse it for political gain, it becomes powerless. The UN reflects the will of the world. It's not a machine. It's a mirror. What we see in it is what we put into it. That is both its greatest strength and its greatest challenge.
And now, dear listeners, it's your turn to think deeply about today's world. What role should the United Nations play in your life, in your country, and in your future? Should it be reformed? Should it be strengthened? Or do we need something entirely new? Whatever your opinion, one thing is clear. The world needs unity. Whether through the UN or another path, we must keep building bridges, not walls.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through global politics, diplomacy, and humanity's greatest challenges. We hope this podcast gave you insight, knowledge, and a reason to care about international cooperation. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, subscribe to the English Globe, and leave us a comment below. Tell us where you're listening from and share your views. Is the United Nations powerful or powerless?
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay united. This is the English Globe, where the world meets in English. Goodbye for now, and thank you for being part of the global conversation.